and I've done a great job putting together the series of programs for this fall. I'm going to ask you to introduce you tonight. So thank you, Jeff.
Your mic on, hopefully. Okay, this is a special pleasure for me because I've known Pauline, oh gosh, over 10 years. I'm calendar impaired, so I don't recall how long it's been. But we worked together at the EPA a number of years ago. And recently, I'm just bumping into her because we both live in Wheaton, and bumped into her a couple of times, and eventually found out she's an author of this interesting book. And we've had conversations about it. And I thought, well, this would be perfect for a program because she's championing an early hero of a lot of people, the Fox, as we know him. And she also talks about another character who is involved in the animal rights movement. And I think both of them were pioneers with what they did. And sometimes headstrong, sometimes forceful. And you might have been hearing about the Belleville Prairie. So here's another hero of mine, George Fell, who helped found the Nature Conservancy and the Land Institute up near Rockford. And so these battles continue. So this is relevant stuff, even though it's history. We still have these environmental challenges and people need to step up. So I'll read something in here about Pauline. This is actually from her book. It's her bio in the book. It reads, Pauline Gambill is a dedicated environmentalist and animal rights advocate. After working many years for the State of Illinois Department of Human Services in Chicago, she took an early retirement and returned to college to obtain a Master of Arts in Environmental Studies. She then worked at the US EPA in Chicago for 10 years. Since her second retirement, she has continued her support of environmental and animal rights causes and has been a member of the Chicago Coalition of Animal Rights. Her other primary interest is genealogy. She has traveled all over the country to do research and has written numerous family histories. So I'm proud to introduce Pauline Gambill.
Is that the way?
Gallon.
Oh.
I said gallon.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for inviting me to speak here tonight. And I'd like to also thank you for helping the preparation of the slides, and also Larry Phillips for preparation of the slides. I'm happy to be here tonight to talk to you about the dual biography that I wrote, the Fox, Feats, and Sharp Tales of pollution fighter James F. Phillips and the animal rights warrior Stephen O. Hendy. These are obviously two men that are very courageous, very intrepid, and very courageous, and I certainly admire what they have tried to accomplish. Now, before I continue, I would like to ask the audience a couple of questions. Who in the audience would climb down a manhole and try to plug it up with refuse in order to prevent a company from polluting the Fox River? Any volunteers to climb down a manhole? My second question is, each of you in the audience would go to a public meeting and bring an electric prod with you and ask the audience if there would be a volunteer to use that electric prod.
Somebody was asking if the host should be muted.
One of you want to
Shut that off.
No. Well, this is a tactic that Steve Hendy used in Kane County at a board meeting in Kane County when he brought an electric prod. By the way, they use those, as you may know, on horses to make them buck in rodeos. It's been banned in some cities and some states, but so he asked if there would be a volunteer in Kane County to use that at the board meeting to use the electric prod on themselves, and no one volunteered. So he used it on himself and suffered the excruciating pain. These are just a couple of the tactics that these two individuals had gone to take their cause. Now, the first two photos I want to show you are the Oswego, first of all, Jim Phillips, Oswego High School senior class photo. That's photo one. And
I just realized I had to do something here.
anyway, at the top of his class page, his senior class page, it says, "The silence is golden, I will be poor all my life." And truer words were never spoken. Gives you just a little idea of what was in store for the public. And the second photo, this is that's James Phillips, that's his high school senior class photo, the Oswego High School in Oswego, Illinois. And photo two is Steve Hiddy's photo from the Harding High School in St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, these two young people look like your ordinary individuals, but like I said, the public had no idea what was in store for them. Now, I'd like to first of all tell you a little bit how I became aware of. Actually, I think Jeff Garris just mentioned that I had worked with the state of Illinois Department of Human Services and had taken an early retirement, and then had gone back to college. And as I was actually, this was in the 1990s, the early 1990s, and as I was driving up Lakeshore Drive on my way to classes up at Northeastern Illinois University, I happened to go by the Shed Aquarium where two beluga whales had died recently. This was in 1992. And I saw this group of protesters, with signs protesting the death of these beluga whales that had been captured in the wild and had been brought to the Shed Aquarium, and both of them had died. And I decided to join that group at another protest. And my first encounter with Steve Hendy was watching him on the stairwell leading up to the Shed Aquarium at a loud confrontation with one of the Shed Aquarium employees. And I was very impressed with his fervor, which is, as you might imagine, is an ongoing trait. At that time, his organization was the Chicago Coalition for Animal Rights, not to be confused with the other one, the Chicago. His was the Chicago. Excuse me. His was the Chicago Animal Rights Coalition, not to be confused with the Chicago Coalition for Animal Rights, which was another organization. And he eventually changed his organization, its name, to SHARP, which is the acronym for Showing Animals Respect and Kindness. And of course, the SHARP also kind of reminds you of how ferocious they can be. And I think Steve Hendy has those traits, actually. Now, with respect to Jim Phillips, as I indicated, I had gone back to college to get a degree in environmental studies and was working at the US EPA. And in 1999, Jim Phillips published his autobiography entitled Raising Kane, The Fox Chronicles. I don't know if any of you are aware of his autobiography. Anyway, it was written under the fictitious author's name of Ray Fox. And the title, Raising Kane, obviously, if you spell Kane, C-A-I-N, that means to cause mission, cause trouble. And this is exactly what Jim Phillips was doing out in Kane County. And he spelled Kane, K-A-N-E, which is the county in which he was undertaking his activities. And he used fictitious names for all the people that he mentions in the book. He didn't want to bring any, notoriety to any of them, especially the ones that might have helped him. And it's a very extensive biography of all the activities he had started in 1969 up to, the late 1980s. So after I read that, of course, I was very impressed with everything we had been doing. Now, I had met other individuals at some of the protests that I attended in Chicago and other areas that were also very staunch environmentalists and animal rights activists. But I finally decided that I would like to write about Jim Phillips and Steve Hendy. Coincidentally, they're both from the Fox Valley area, Kane County, and obviously both, with very intense, intense ways of bringing their cause to the attention of the public. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I prepared to write the dual biography. Unfortunately, I never had the good fortune to meet Jim Phillips because he died in 2001. But I was able to meet Patricia Torrance, who had edited his autobiography and was a good friend of his. She lives out in Montgomery, area where Jim Phillips lived. Excuse me. So she was very helpful to me, supplied a great deal. She was very willing to tell me her impressions of Jim Phillips, and she supplied a great deal of information about him and resources I could use, the people I should interview. And I did have a chance fortunately, to interview a lot of the people that knew Jim Phillips. And one thing that came to mind recently was how willing everyone was to provide their impressions about both Jim Phillips and Steve Hendy, because they admired what they were doing and supported what they were doing. I also had the good fortune to interview two of Jim Phillips' nephews and a niece out in the Fox Valley area, and they actually had accompanied him on some of his activities. And I also had the good fortune to interview his only surviving sibling, Margaret. She was in her 90s and living down in Arkansas. And she provided a very fond remembrance of Jim Phillips, but he was just a little boy. I really appreciated her generosity in doing that. As I said, she was in her 90s. This was a couple of years ago when I interviewed her by email and by phone. Unfortunately, she passed away in April of this year, just when my book was published. So unfortunately, she didn't have a chance to see it, but her daughter and grandchildren will have a chance to read about their Uncle Jim. Now, with respect to Steve Hendy, I had the good fortune to interview him a couple of times out in Kane County when he was practicing with his drone, the instrument he uses to videotape the cruelty that occurs in many events. And I also was able to interview two of his, what he calls investigators. He has approximately 4 or 5 different investigators that help him with his activities throughout the country. So he travels a great deal, and so do the investigators. Now, of course, I utilized a lot of other resources, especially the Aurora Santori Library, which has a history section, a section in their history department devoted to Jim Phillips, and a tremendous number of articles that were written about him, and also the Little White School Museum in Oswego, Illinois. Of course, they really admire Jim Phillips, and they were always, everybody was so willing to help me and give me information. Now, I'd like to just mention a couple of the many intrepid actions that were undertaken by Jim Phillips and Steve Hendy over the years. Now, this slide number 3, which is, it says, this was posted over the Armadale Company drainage. Actually, it was posted in 1980, the oil company was an ongoing target of Jim Phillips because they were allowing pollution to enter the Mill Creek and then into the Fox River. And he kept attacking them in different ways by posting signs. And as I said, this one says, we thought you understood what you did to us before. Why do we have to defend ourselves again? And if you notice at the bottom left-hand corner, it says Fox. And the O has the face of a fox. This is what he put on all of his signs, which was very clever, actually. All right. Yeah, like I said, this is was an ongoing target, but this particular one was posted in 1988. He started these activities with the out company in 1960. Eventually, as I indicated in the book, they did clean up their act. They were able to get money from their headquarters, the main headquarters, that they finally did. Now, the next slide shows, well, I should mention that most of the activities that Jim Phillips undertook were in the evening, cover of darkness. But he did do a couple of things during the daytime. And this is where he was posting a sign on the Picasso statue in the Civic Center. This was in 1971. And it shows an official from U.S. Steel talking with Mayor Richard Daley. And of course, U.S. Steel was already polluting the river and the channels leading into Lake Michigan. And they were actually a target of Jim Phillips also. But the poster, and Richard Daley at that time was wanted to build an airport out on Lake Michigan. And of course, that would have added to the pollution that was already being caused by U.S. Steel. So the poster shows this U.S. Steel official saying to Mayor Daley, feel free to use the lake, Dick. We do. Now, as he was posting the sign, the policeman saw him, told him to take it down, started chasing him. Fortunately, he was able to escape with the help of some friends that got in between Jim Phillips and the policeman so they could return it for catching him. Now, with respect to Steve Hendy, he has been active since the early 1990s, and he's still going strong, believe it or not. The first photo the next photo I wanted to show you, you can see the blood on his shirt. He was rescuing a pigeon that had been wounded in a pigeon shoot. This was at the Philadelphia Gun Club on the banks of the Delaware River, and he rescued the pigeon, and they took it to a rehab place and were able to, repair the wounds and he got a good home for the pigeon. Now, pigeon shoots are an ongoing target of Steve Hendy. Believe it or not, some states actually allow it, especially Pennsylvania, which is one of the places that Steve Hendy has targeted as far as pigeon shoots. These pigeons are captured or raised, or specifically raised to be shot out of the box in a contest for people to shoot them. And then they let the wounded ones lie on the ground and people send the kids out to break their necks off and throw them in the trash can. That's what they do with the pigeons. So obviously this has been an ongoing situation, cruelty, I should say, that Steve Hendy has been targeting for many years, I should say. Now the next slide I want to show you is that's Steve Hendy in Kane County with his drone. He uses what he does with the drone. He attaches video equipment, and then they try to videotape the cruelty that goes on in various situations, not just pigeon shoots, but rodeos and all types of other activities. And and then he shows these videos at public meetings or website, which by the way is, sharkonline.org. Of course, some of them are very graphic and not very pleasant to watch, but he wants the public to be aware of how cool these events are. Now, the next slide is Steve Henry. That was taken in 2011, where he was assaulted by a pigeon shooter in Brooks County, Pennsylvania. He was hit over the head with the metal part of a leash. Fortunately, he was not seriously injured, but still he was injured. They didn't do anything with the person. I guess they didn't bother to catch the person that did this. Now, more recently, in fact, just this year, Steve Henry was trying to videotape what goes on at a cockfight. Are you familiar with cockfights? They raise these roosters, they train them how to fight, and then they put them in a pen and let them go after each other until one of them succumbs to its injuries, and then they just either kill it or throw it in the garbage. So he was trying to videotape this in Ohio, and these two men attacked him and beat him up badly. This time he ended up in the hospital with broken ribs and other injuries. This just happened earlier this year. Fortunately, both of those individuals that beat him up were arrested. And just in the past couple of weeks, I was notified that one of them had already gone to trial and been convicted and sentenced 4 to 6 years. So fortunately, they're going to have to pay for the cruelty that they have caused. Now, I'd like to bring attention to two sections in the book that for me were very rewarding and interesting to research and to write about. The first one is in chapter 3 about the incredible 1973 reenactment of the Joliet Marquette expedition on the Mississippi River. This was 300 years after that. It was 1673 when Joliet Marquette took this expedition all the way from Wisconsin down on the Mississippi River, all the way down to the mouth of the Arkansas River. And incredible, Jim Phillips and 6 other men in May of 1973 embarked on a 4-month journey to replicate this incredible expedition of the Mississippi River, starting up in Wisconsin and all the way down to the mouth of the Arkansas River. And they camped out every night. I mean, believe it or not, they camped out every night. By the way, they used birch bark canoes. They had 2 birch bark canoes that had been made for them by Ralph Feats. He's the owner, Ralph Feats, he's the owner of a canoe shop where he actually, made canoes. And he made them out of birch bark canoes, just like the ones that would have been used by the original voyagers. I still can't believe what they did. They camped out every night. Jim Phillips had the job as cook, and they used to make a lot of jokes about his. That's when the peanut. I didn't mention peanut butter. Peanut butter was one of his favorite things, and of course he used a lot of peanut butter when he was preparing meals for them. So they camped out every single night and under their birch bark canoes. Now, they weren't always near populated areas, so they, like I said, Jim Phillips had to prepare all the meals. When they were near populated areas, some of the townsfolk would help bring supplies or even provide them with meals. And they would also, at some of these stops, would give presentations, these gentlemen. Now, the next, you've got the slide up there already. I'm sorry. Oh, by the way, I should mention that they actually dressed in the type of clothing that the original voyagers might have worn. In fact, H. Dean Campbell, one of the men on this completion of the Marquette Joliet voyage, he did a lot of research about what kind of clothes they would have worn. And his wife and mother-in-law actually made that clothing for them to wear, which is, they said, was similar to what he found in the original voyages. I mean, it was quite an undertaking that they went through. And as I said, they stopped at some locations, and in addition to getting meals and so forth by the local townsfolk, they put on presentations where they would sing French Voyager songs, and Jim Phillips, which he's the gentleman standing there, who portrayed one of the Voyagers, gave a very passionate speech. And he talked as if he were one of the original Voyagers, the 1673 Voyagers, as to what had happened to the river's waters since they undertook that voyage in 300 years prior. It was a 2,000-mile voyage, by the way. I don't know how many of you would like to try to do something like that. Oh, I see something. Yeah, he gave an incredibly, as I said, a passionate speech, and trying to bring attention to what had happened to the river's waters and the 300 years since their original voyage. Now, the other section I wanted to bring attention to is the afterword, where I talk about the commonalities among Jim Phillips, Steve Hendy, and Henry David Thoreau. As I'm sure you know, Thoreau was a 19th century naturalist and author and philosopher. And so I talk about commonalities, not just between Jim Phillips and Thoreau, but Steve Hendy as well. No, I'd like to tell you how I decided to do this. And this was all the result of a column written over 50 years ago by a well-known Aurora Beacon, the Aurora Beacon news columnist, Charles Ward. He knew who the fox was. He used to write articles about the fox that appeared in the Aurora Beacon newspaper. And at the end of one of his articles about the fox, he made this comment. If Thoreau were alive during the time that Jim Phillips was undertaking his activities, Thoreau would have been the fox. Now, he didn't elaborate, but obviously he was, talking about their cares about the environment. But I'd like to say this sent me on a very interesting and rewarding journey where I discovered so many commonalities, not just between Jim Phillips and Thoreau about their early childhood and their entire life, but also with some of the commonalities with Steve Hendy. And it was, as I said, very rewarding and interesting for me to do all this research. And I just want to mention that. Okay, this ends my talk, and now I'm ready for any questions you might have. Do you have a question?
Maybe, Jeff, maybe people can, you could say on the microphone, invite people on the microphone to write any questions in the chat.
Okay, if you'd like to, yeah, anyone, who has tuned in, if you have a question, and if you could write it on the
Yeah.
On the computer. Yeah, if you write it on the website, then yes.
Yes, I've got a question, and I thoroughly understand and support all Steve Hendy's desire against animal cruelty. It's appalling. However, I'm involved in ecological restoration in Cook County and have done some here in DuPage County. And one of the really big problems is the overabundance of deer.
Oh, okay.
And there have been efforts and instances of deer culling by marine sharpshooters and professional cullers. So they're not out to torture the animals, how would Steve Hindy view this activity, do you think?
Well, he obviously, how does he react to that?
Yeah, how I,
He was extremely upset about that. I think I do mention it in the book. Yeah,
oh, okay.
he was upset by the way they would capture them and then hit them with the,
Yeah, see, that
in their
that
head or
is a
something.
very,
they would
that's,
put them in a pen and then these guys would come up and kill them. I don't know, it seemed very, I mean, he was object, yeah.
I can respond to that. That, in fact, was a very poor
The way he did it.
plan on the part of the DuPage County
Yes.
people. They had no thought behind it. In Cook County, they use sharpshooters, and literally the animals are deceased before they can even hear the bullet.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a
Well,
different,
yeah,
it's a horrible method. Cruelty is horrible. You
Yeah.
can't, that can't be accounted.
Well, the overpopulation obviously is a problem, and I don't know that I can tell you about that. It's just that he was very much against the way in which they were doing it. The way they.
Well, they use sharpshooters.
And then just shot them in the head. I mean, just the way he described it. I think I might have mentioned it in the, yeah. But on the other hand, he did realize, that there was an overpopulation and we do have to do something about that. One thing I'd like to mention, as I say in the book,
Nobody's answered.
he was probably, in fact, one of the colonies that was going on, had indicated that Steve Hendy is probably one of the most admired and the most hated.
Yeah.
But the ones that hate him usually are the ones that are, perpetrating the cruelty. And they don't recognize it, but no, I see what you mean about the deer calling it with the way in which they were doing it, that he. Did you have any quick? Oh, I think he goes. I don't know who was first. Okay.
So you said that Steve Hindy is still alive and active. What is he doing lately? Can you tell us anything about it? I'll take this on. Can you tell us anything about Steve Hindy's current activities?
Yeah, he's going after the cockfighters. Yeah, and still the pigeon shoots. But just like I said, this year he's very focusing on cockfights, which I didn't even realize what that was until I looked up cockfights. Found out they're roosters. Like I said, they train them to fight, and then it's a very cool, just a cool activity.
There's more to it. There's more to it than what you said as well. I mean, don't they usually put razors on their feet? That's what, and they bet on them. They bet on too, but they put razors on their
He's
feet,
still going at.
and that's how they
In fact,
harm each other.
I emailed him today because not today, a few days ago, I should say, because I had some questions about, where pigeon shoots were at, it's actually, Pennsylvania is the only state where it occurs, openly and regularly. It's the only state, it's prohibited by statute in a number of states, but not, in Illinois, there's no specific, law, but there are not pigeon shoots. But he's still, right now, he's been pursuing the cockfight. Like I said, I don't know how to do it because he was injured so badly, by these two men that cockfight. And so, he's still going strong. I don't know, he's in his 60s. I don't know how much longer.
Jeff, do you have information on the book?
Yeah, I did answer.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Bonnie had a question.
Was Steve Hindy involved with circuses like?
Circus.
At all? I can't remember if he was involved with the circuses.
I'm sorry, they should give you a microphone.
Was he involved with the circus?
Oh,
you know?
yes, yeah, he was very much against the use of elephants in circuses. But actually, most places now have banned
Jeff,
used animals.
You have information on Pauline's book? Can you give that to
There was
her?
a very
Put it in the chat.
Oh, you put that in there
story
too.
in that I wrote about. Where this type this, I also think this is in the country, I believe, where they escaped from the circus and they, they killed them.
Just want to mention one comment. The canoe that you mentioned
Oh,
is
yeah.
on display at the Chicago Maritime Museum.
Oh, yeah,
I
oh,
believe,
right,
yeah.
yeah, it is, right, I'm sorry, I did mention that, yeah, that, I have not actually viewed it, but, was there a question about?
They just mentioned that somebody online knows about it, so
Oh,
there's,
who said it?
Yeah, Pauline, I've seen it. I bet the Chicago Maritime Museum is wonderful, wonderful place in Bridgeport. It's in the old Spiegel Industrial Building on 34th, and it's a wonderful visit. I would encourage you to go.
Oh,
And all of Ralph Freese's multiple vessels were donated at his, when he died.
yeah.
So they're not all able to be viewed all the time, but they're there.
Well, it was all
Excuse me.
thanks to Ralph Reese that they went on that replication of the Joliet. It was his idea. I forgot to mention that. It was actually Ralph Reese's idea that they, because he realized it was the anniversary of, of the anniversary. And forgot to mention that it was all his idea. He built the canoes, the Birch Bark canoe. Yeah, he was quite a canoe enthusiast, and he also wanted to bring attention to the pollution and so forth. Okay.
We want to thank you so much. We have one more quick little thing. I'll still talk about the first. All right, so Pauline.
Thank you, Pauline.
Oh, Pauline, Sherry's asked me if you have books here that people could purchase,
Oh,
or
yes, I do have.
and would you sign them?
Oh,
Would
yes,
you
I
sign
do
them?
that too. Yes, I do that.
So that is really nice. What if people want
I
to?
put some on in the back there, but they're not all right, but I have.
What if people want to purchase one of your books and they're online here and they
Oh,
don't
yeah,
have
oh,
one?
yes, on Amazon, it can be purchased, or you can order it from Barnes and Noble.
Can we hold it up? Can you hold up your
Oh,
book so
sure.
people can see it?
Yes, right here. Yeah. Actually, some of my friends told me they did use Amazon and they found out they could order it. Barnes and Noble doesn't keep it in stock, but they'll order it and get it within 2 days.
Yeah.
You probably ordered from a bookstore in downtown Glen Ellen.
I don't.
I
Oh,
would,
that's right, you did mention that.
Yeah.
You were able to order it from another.
Pauline, you are absolutely delightful. We are so happy that you came and joined us. And
Can I see
in
the
the
book for a second?
spirit of your comments, we're going to talk about activism a little bit more, very briefly.
Jeff, can I see your copy of the book for a second? The title of that book.
Thank you. I'm going to take tons of your time, and I'm sorry. Really, I gotta get my glasses. I'm sorry, everybody. Oh, yeah, we'll do the rest. Okay. Sorry, guys. Most of you are probably very well aware of the Bell Bowl Prairie. But I'm mentioning it briefly today and give you just a little bit of background on it, because it was activism that has given a temporary stay to the demise of this prairie, just like the activism of the two gentlemen in the book that Pauline has written. So the Bell Bowl Prairie is in the Rockford area. It's right near the Rockford Airport. It's called a natural dry gravel prairie, and it supports endangered species. It's not very big, but it's a remnant prairie, which means It's not a farm field that has native plants planted there to come back and look like a real prairie. It has never been farmed. So it's a remnant from the old prairie days. In fact, the whole prairie is 25 acres. There is a small, about a 5-acre part of it that is listed as extremely rare and special. And there's a number of steward organizations that work diligently. To preserve and take care of it. So it's really quite special. When, and just to give you a little hint, Illinois is the prairie state. We love prairies, but only 1/100th of 1% of our natural prairies remain. So that speaks to the rarity of this. We can't afford to lose more. So Rockford Airport wants to expand. And it would mean bulldozing over, because they share a property, it's on a common property, and there's an easement involved, and it would mean bulldozing over part of this prairie. Well, when this issue arose, public outcry thankfully was loud and ferocious. And there's a Facebook page of Save Bell, just like ding, 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 Bell, Bell Bowl, B-O-W-L, Bell Bowl Prairie. You can find information about it on Facebook, and there's actually a website also that's savebellbowlprairie.com. And I would encourage you to read about it, because it's really a testament to public outcry that it's been, what has happened is it has been postponed. A decision will be made in March as to whether they will continue to do this expansion project. And one thing, I listened to Jack Darren, the director of Sierra Club, was interviewed on a radio show. And one of the interesting things is we have so much ingenuity nowadays, that there's ways of making more parking lot with less physical space. We can go up. We can do a multi-tiered parking lot, so as much ground area isn't needed. We can use different surfaces on the area that does need to be paved, so that water can trickle down through the permeable pavers and not create a fast-running runoff into and degrading the area of the prairie. So there are engineers who are offering creative suggestions, and the hope is that compromise and working together, and the Rockford area will be able to see their expansion project and help boom their economy in a way that doesn't destroy this precious remnant. So people say, oh, what can I do? What can I do? There's a number of things, and there was a list online, and I'm just going to read you some of the suggestions from the list. There's 9, so I'll be quick. Tell 5 people that you think may not have heard about the story that you just heard tonight, and encourage them to look it up on Facebook. And it's actually savebellbowlprairie.org, .com, I'm sorry, .org. Go online and attend one of their events. Join their Facebook group, just like them on Facebook, join their group. Call and send some emails. You could send them emails to some organizations that are the Sierra Club, or you could send emails to local government officials. The mayor of Rockford, the Rockford Airport Alder, it's a person who's in charge of the airport. His name is April Pruti. You could send something to the Winnebago County Board Chairperson and the Winnebago County Board members. So those people are available. You can look online who's in charge of Winnebago County, who is the mayor of Rockford, and send them an email or write him a snail mail letter. And their addresses are always online. The Illinois Environmental Council is another organization that has action alerts, and you can find them on their website. If you tweet, use the hashtag, it's a number sign when you tweet, and say Save Bell Bowl Prairie to increase interest in this. And check this out. Create a drawing, a poem, or a song, and share it on your Facebook. And then, of course, there are legal fees, and through the website, you can donate to the cause to help defray some of the legal costs. So there are things that we can do. We can all be a little Steve Hindi or a little Jim Phillips without necessarily crawling into a drain pipe. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the Bell Bowl Prairie. I don't know if there are any questions. This is for the people who are here. I have some handouts for you to take if you like. Yeah, Bonnie? That is, I think it's actually, I think it might, I don't know. I can't tell you exactly. I'm not gonna dance around this. I think the airport authority may own it, but they have leased it to the prairie people, so I don't want to say that out loud. Yeah, but I don't know for definite sure. Sorry. Research and let me know. Any other questions? Because we are having a raffle for those of you who are here in person. I'm sorry, you guys who are out in the web world. Should we do our raffle? And we could probably stop recording. It's 8:25. I want to thank everyone for signing on tonight. We're so glad that you did.